Humanity had always reached for the stars, dreaming of wonder and light, but the stars did not welcome them with answers. They welcomed them with fire. The colonies that once glittered like jewels across Saturn's skies now burned in silence, their people erased by an enemy that did not conquer but consumed. And in that silence, one truth echoed through the void. Humanity was no longer fighting for survival. It was fighting to be remembered. The stars had always been humanity's dream. Tonight, they became its graveyard. Saturn's rings, once shimmering like glass, now glowed crimson, not from sunlight, but from the burning wreckage of Titan colony below. On the bridge of the USS Orion, Captain Ethan Walker watched the fire spread across the domes that had once been humanity's proudest frontier. The comms howled with desperate voices, families begging for rescue, soldiers screaming in static as alien fire consumed them. And through it all, Ethan could only stand there, powerless. A father who had promised his daughter Lily that he would come home, but promises meant nothing in war. The enemy had arrived. The Zorith did not conquer. They erased. They left no survivors, no ruins, not even silence, only the absence of what once was. Their ships tore through the void like obsidian predators, alive with veins of blue fire, multiplying when destroyed, feeding on fear itself. Entire worlds had already gone dark in their wake, and now Saturn was next. Ethan's crew looked to him for orders, for salvation, for hope, but staring into the abyss of the Zorith fleet, he realized a truth that burned colder than space itself. This was not a battle. This was extinction, drawn out in screams and fire. And yet, as the Orion's shields flared under the first alien barrage, Ethan clenched his fist. Humanity would not vanish quietly. If they were to fall, they would fall in fire so bright the galaxy would never forget. "Status report," Ethan barked, forcing his voice to cut through the chaos. Commander Sarah Hayes, his second in command, did not flinch as sparks rained from the overhead conduits. "Shields down to 70%. Forward batteries are locked, awaiting your command. Launch all fighters," Ethan ordered. "We are not dying in their shadow." The hangar bays opened, spewing squadrons of human fighters into the void. Among them was Lieutenant James Carter, the youngest pilot on the Orion, his voice crackling with adrenaline. "This is Red Leader, engaging targets. Let's show these things humanity does not run." The fighters streaked toward the alien swarm, plasma trails carving the darkness. For a moment, hope flickered as the first Zorith ship exploded under a volley of human fire. But then, before the cheers could rise, the wreckage twisted, reformed, and split into two smaller, living vessels, screeching through the void like predators released from chains. "My God," Sarah whispered, "they don't die. They divide." The Orion shuddered as the new ships struck back, beams of blue fire ripping across its hull. The command deck shook, alarms blaring as metal groaned like a wounded beast. "Evasive maneuvers," Ethan shouted, gripping the console as the floor pitched. His knuckles whitened as he fought the sinking weight in his chest. Lily's face flashed in his mind, her wide brown eyes, her small hand clutching his sleeve the night before he left. "Promise me you will come back, Dad," she had whispered, and he had lied with a smile. "Always." "Captain," Sarah's voice yanked him back. "We have lost 3 squadrons already. Carter's group is pinned between 2 of them." The comms erupted. Carter's panicked voice cut through static. "This is Red Leader. I am hit. My stabilizers are gone. I can't." The signal ended in silence. Ethan slammed a fist against the console. Every death clawed at him, but he could not falter. Not now. "Target their largest ship with the main cannon. Give me every ounce of power we have left." The Orion's core roared, channeling raw energy into its forward batteries. A blinding beam of plasma tore through the void, slamming into the largest Zorith vessel. The alien Leviathan convulsed its bioluminescent veins, bursting in a cascade of light. For a heartbeat, the crew dared to believe they had struck a mortal blow, but then the ship split apart, birthing a swarm of smaller hunters that swirled like vultures around the Orion. The crew's cheers turned to horror. "They are endless," Sarah breathed, her voice cracking. Ethan looked at the faces of his crew, faces pale with fear, eyes begging for answers he did not have. He wanted to tell them it would be all right, that they would make it home, that he would keep his promise to Lily, but promises meant nothing in war. The deck shook again as another barrage hammered their shields. Warning lights flared red across the control room. Oxygen reserves dipped. Hull breaches screamed warnings. Ethan drew a long breath, steadying himself. "We fight," he said at last, his voice low but unyielding. "No retreat, no surrender. Let the stars remember that humanity did not bow." The Orion surged forward into the heart of the alien swarm. The Orion plunged deeper into the chaos, its hull blazing with the scars of battle. The void around it was alive with death, fragments of shattered fighters drifting like fireflies caught in the eternal night. The Zorith swarm tightened its noose, their living vessels weaving in perfect silence, like predators that had hunted for millennia. Ethan stood at the center of the bridge, his heart beating like a war drum. Every decision he made now weighed on the lives of his crew and the memory of those already lost. The faces of his fallen pilots lingered in his mind, Carter most of all, his youngest, brightest. A boy who had once told him with a grin that he wanted to be the first man to fly through Saturn's rings. Now, he was nothing more than dust among them. "Captain, the engines are failing," shouted Chief Engineer Marcus Cole, a man with grease always smeared on his hands and loyalty etched into his bones. "We have lost the port thrusters. Another hit and we will lose maneuverability altogether." Ethan did not allow hesitation to take root. "We hold steady, Marcus. Patch what you can and reroute power from non-essentials." "Non-essentials?" Marcus barked with a hollow laugh. "What do you think is non-essential when the whole damn ship is bleeding?" Sarah cut in, her voice sharp as steel. "Enough, both of you. The crew needs strength, not despair. Captain, give the order. What is our play?" Ethan stared out at the Zorith fleet. Their vessels pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm like the beating of a colossal heart. It struck him then. They were not just ships. They were alive. Every single one of them was a piece of a greater organism, a hive that thrived on destruction. "We cannot win this fight," he said at last, "but we can buy time. The evacuation ships from Titan, they might still be out there hiding among the moons. If we can draw the swarm away, they might escape." "And what of us?" Marcus asked, his voice heavy with the knowledge of the answer. Ethan steadied his breath. "We do what humanity has always done when the night closes in. We light a fire." The bridge fell silent, not with fear but with the weight of acceptance. Every soul aboard knew what those words meant. The Orion would not retreat. It would stand and burn bright enough to give others a chance. Alarms screamed again as another wave of fire slammed into their shields. The deck lurched, several crew thrown to the ground. Sarah pulled herself up, blood streaking her forehead. "Shields at 30%, Captain. We cannot take another direct hit." "Launch the drones," Ethan ordered. All of them. Dozens of small unmanned crafts poured from the Orion, scattering like sparks. Each carried experimental warheads, unstable, volatile, barely tested. The drones swarmed toward the enemy, weaving among their ranks and detonating in brilliant flashes. For the first time, the Zorith formation faltered, their vessels recoiling from the sudden bursts of energy. It worked. Marcus gasped, eyes wide. "They are hesitating." "Not enough," Ethan muttered, "but it will have to do. Bring us around, target their central cluster." The Orion turned its engines, screaming against the strain. Ethan felt every vibration in his bones. He looked once more at the hollow display of Titan Colony, now nothing more than a crimson scar on the surface of the moon. He whispered an apology to the dead, to Carter, to every voice that had faded into static. Then he thought of Lily. He imagined her standing at the window of their home on Earth, waiting for a father who might never return. He had promised her safety. He had promised her tomorrow. But the universe had other designs. The Zorith regrouped faster than expected, their vessels converging with terrifying precision. A spear of blue fire lanced through the void, striking the Orion amidships. The deck exploded in chaos, consoles bursting, flames licking across the bridge.
"Hull breach on deck 9, screamed a voice over the comm. "Casualties reported." Ethan clenched his fists, refusing to let despair break him. "All hands brace for impact. Fire back with everything we have." The Orion unleashed a storm of plasma, its guns roaring like thunder against the endless night. Alien vessels shattered under the onslaught, fragments spiraling away. Yet still some of those fragments reformed, smaller, hungrier, more vicious. The crew fought with every ounce of courage they had. Each man and woman aboard became a soldier of the last stand. Engineers fought fires with their bare hands. Medics carried the wounded through smoke-filled corridors. Gunners wept as they fired, knowing each shot might be their last. Sarah stood beside Ethan, unwavering despite the blood on her face. "If this is the end," she said, "then let it be an end worthy of history." Ethan met her gaze and nodded. Together, they gave the final order. "Drive us into the heart of them." The Orion surged forward, engines burning with the last of their strength. Straight into the swarm, straight into the abyss.
The alien ships closed in, their blue fire lashing like whips across the human vessel. But the Orion did not falter. It became a spear of defiance cutting through the darkness. In that moment, Ethan felt no fear, only resolve. He was a father, a captain, a man who carried the weight of a dying species. And if this was their grave, then he would make sure it blazed bright enough for Lily to see from Earth itself. As the Orion tore into the Zorith core, its reactors began to overload, Marcus shouting reports that no one could hear above the roar. The crew held their stations, hands steady, hearts unbroken. Ethan closed his eyes and whispered one last promise. "Lily, forgive me, but know this. I did not bow." And the Orion vanished into light. Silence followed. The light of Orion's sacrifice, the void that had roared with fire, now drifted quiet. Only the fragments of battle lingering among Saturn's rings. For a moment it seemed as though the Zorith had been slowed, their swarm scattering as if stunned by the brilliance of the human vessel's final stand. But silence is never victory. The Zorith returned. Their ships pulsed once more, their blue veins burning brighter as though they had feasted upon the energy of the Orion itself. From the wreckage of humanity's defiance, the enemy grew stronger. Far away, hidden in the shadow of Rhea, one of Saturn's moons, a handful of evacuation ships floated. Engines cold, cloaked against detection. Inside those steel husks, survivors watched the sky with trembling hearts. Among them was Lieutenant James Carter, or rather the boy who had once been James Carter. For he had not died, as the Orion believed. His fighter had been thrown clear of the explosion, crippled, drifting on emergency power until a passing freighter dragged him aboard. Now James sat in the dark of the refugee vessel, his body broken, his spirit heavier than the void. He had seen the Orion charge into the swarm. He had felt the shockwave. He had known in his heart that his captain, his friends, his family among the stars were gone. Yet his mind refused to accept it. Ethan Walker had been more than a commander to him. He had been a guide, a father figure, and now that fire had been extinguished. James clenched his fists around the small charm he carried, a token his sister had given him before he left Earth. He whispered to the silent cabin, "Captain, you said humanity would not bow. Then I swear neither will I." Around him, the survivors stirred. There were scientists from Titan, families who had lost everything, soldiers who no longer had a war to fight. They looked at James with hollow eyes, for he was still in uniform, still carrying the weight of command, even if it was not his to bear. A scientist, an older woman named Dr. Evelyn Ross, broke the silence. Her voice was cracked, but her words steady.
The Orion bought us this chance, but it will mean nothing if we...
The Zorith will come for us next. We must find a way to fight back. Fight back, muttered one of the miners who had worked the ice fields of Titan. With what? Sticks and prayers. With knowledge, Evelyn replied. Her eyes glinted with something fierce. The Zorith are not gods. They bleed energy. They consume it. But what if we starve them? What if we find the frequency, the weapon that denies them their feast? James listened, his heart thundering. For the first time since the Orion fell, he felt a flicker of purpose. He rose, though his legs trembled. Every survivor turned toward him. Then we become the spark, he said. We do not wait for Earth to save us. We will carry the fight. We will carry the memory of those who burned before us. The survivors murmured their doubts, but also their hope. In that moment, James felt Ethan beside him, as though the captain's spirit lingered in the shadows of the ship, guiding him forward. Outside, the refugee flotilla drifted unnoticed. The Zorith had swarmed deeper into the system, their vessels spreading like ink across the black. But even predators have blind spots, and in that blindness, humanity's embers still burned. Days passed within the hiding ships. The survivors repaired what they could, gathering scraps of technology from ruined outposts. They transformed the freighters into makeshift warcraft, crude and fragile, but armed with resolve. Evelyn worked tirelessly, deciphering the alien signals, patterns of pulse and resonance that seemed to control the living vessels. She believed there was a key hidden within those rhythms, a way to disrupt the swarm from within. James trained the miners and civilians into fighters. Every day he stood before them, his body aching but his voice firm. He told them stories of the Orion, of Captain Walker, of Sarah and Marcus, and the crew who had given everything. He painted them not as martyrs, but as torches that lit the path ahead, and the more he spoke, the stronger their eyes grew. But strength does not go unnoticed. One night, as the flotilla drifted among the frozen cliffs of Rhea, alarms screamed. A shadow fell across the stars. A Zorith hunter vessel had found them. Panic spread among the survivors, cries echoing through the steel halls. James raced to the command deck, staring at the living monster that loomed before them. Its blue fire seared the ice, its body rippling like muscle and bone given shape by nightmare. Evelyn gripped the console, her face pale but unbroken. This is it, James. We either test the theory or we die here. Do it, James said, his jaw tight. Evelyn tuned the frequencies, the ship groaning as its systems overloaded. A pulse of sound, invisible but powerful, rippled through the void. The Zorith vessel convulsed, its veins flickered, dimmed for a heartbeat. The survivors gasped. "It works," Evelyn cried. "It disrupts them." But the effect was brief. The alien ship roared back to life, lashing out with a storm of energy that ripped across the flotilla. One of the smaller freighters exploded, torn apart in fire and silence. James felt the heat of loss sear his chest. He slammed his hand against the console. Again, Evelyn. Louder. The frequency pulsed once more, stronger, sharper. The Zorith vessel shrieked in vibrations that rattled the survivor's teeth. Its body twisted, writhing against the unseen assault. And then, in a burst of blue flame, it shattered. The bridge fell silent, every survivor staring in disbelief.
They had done it. A human fleet of scraps and survivors had killed a god. James sank into the chair, his breath ragged, his heart alight. For the first time since Saturn burned, he felt the tide shift. "We are not done," he whispered to himself. But tonight, humanity has struck back. And in the silence of space, where once despair had reigned, a spark of rebellion was born. The wreckage of the Zorith hunter drifted across the void, its blue fire extinguished. Its remains tumbled silently through the shadow of Rhea like the corpse of a beast felled by prey that refused to die. Inside the flotilla of survivors, a new fire burned, not of fear, but of defiance. For the first time in the war, humanity had found a weapon that could wound the unstoppable. James Carter stood before the survivors in the largest cargo bay turned meeting hall. His body was weak, still stitched together by medics, but his voice carried strength. Every man, woman, and child listened with eyes wide and hearts trembling. He told them what they had done, what Evelyn had discovered. He told them that the Zorith could bleed, and if they could bleed, they could die. But he did not speak of victory. He spoke of sacrifice. He told them of Ethan Walker and the Orion. He told them of the promise that humanity would not vanish quietly. And he promised them that their struggle was not just survival, but vengeance. The people answered not with cheers, but with a silence deeper than any vow. For they knew what lay ahead. They were no longer passengers hiding in the dark. They were soldiers of the last war. Days turned into weeks. The survivors reshaped their ships, welding steel plates over fragile hulls, arming turrets scavenged from mining rigs. Evelyn built crude resonance generators, designed to unleash the frequencies that crippled the alien vessels. The fleet became something new, something that should not have existed. Ships meant for cargo, for families, for science, were reborn as weapons, the Exodus fleet. James trained every able soul in combat. He himself climbed into the simulators until his body screamed. He had been a pilot once. Now he was more. He was becoming a leader, though the weight of it bent his shoulders. In the quiet of night, he still carried the charm his sister had given him. He still whispered to the stars that he would not fail her. Not again. Evelyn rarely left the labs. Her hair went gray in weeks, her hands shaking from exhaustion. But her eyes burned with obsession. She studied every signal the Zorith emitted, every pulse that shimmered across their veins. She spoke of harmonics, of breaking the hive link, of severing the unity that made them unstoppable. If she was right, then humanity had more than a weapon. They had a chance. But the Zorith did not wait. They spread through the system, devouring moons, stripping stations, leaving nothing but silence. Their swarm grew, each vessel a living wound on the sky. They had not forgotten the flotilla. They were hunting. It was on the edge of Enceladus that the war truly began. The Exodus fleet emerged from the shadows, engines burning, shields raised. Ahead of them loomed a Zorith cruiser, larger than any ship humanity had ever built. Its body was a cathedral of bone and fire, its surface shifting as though alive. James stood in the cockpit of his fighter, reborn from wreckage. His heart pounded as he listened to Evelyn's voice over the comm. "The resonance array is ready, James. Keep them in range."
and we will break them. The battle erupted. The Exodus fleet fired with every weapon they had. Plasma and missiles streaked through the void, slamming into the alien Leviathan. The creature screamed, its body rippling. But it did not fall. Its claws of blue energy tore into the fleet, ripping apart a converted freighter, scattering survivors into flame. "Hold the line," James shouted. His voice echoed in every ear. "Hold the line for Orion. Hold it for Earth. Hold it for the fallen." The resonance array activated. A wave of invisible sound rippled across the void. The Zorith cruiser convulsed its veins, flickering its body writhing. The survivors roared in disbelief as the Leviathan staggered. "It is working," Evelyn cried. "Do not stop." The fleet pressed harder, every gun, every missile, every ounce of fury unleashed. The cruiser reeled, but then it screamed a sound that pierced into the skulls of every human. A psychic echo of rage and hunger. The smaller Zorith vessels swarmed from its body, dozens of hunters erupting like parasites. The line faltered. Ships broke formation as the hunters tore into them. One by one, survivors screamed their last. James felt despair claw at him until Sarah's voice filled his memory, not with words, but with steel. "If this is the end, let it be an end worthy of history." James gritted his teeth. He drove his fighter into the swarm, guns blazing. His vision blurred with tears, but his aim never wavered. He thought of Ethan, of Lily, of every promise unkept and every dream unbowed. He thought of humanity not as victims, but as fire. The resonance array pulsed again, stronger. The great cruiser convulsed one final time. Then with a shudder that split the void, it shattered. Blue fire erupted across Enceladus' sky, fragments raining like dying stars. The hunters shrieked, writhing aimlessly without their anchor. Some exploded, others fled into the dark. The battle was won, but victory tasted like ash. The Exodus fleet had lost half its number, families torn apart, fighters extinguished, names whispered only in grief. Yet as James stood among the survivors in the aftermath, he saw not despair but determination. They had faced the Zorith and lived. They had proved the enemy could fall. Evelyn collapsed in exhaustion, her body frail, her spirit unbroken. She whispered through cracked lips, "This is only the beginning. We have wounded them, but the hive will come. The core itself will awaken." James lifted her gently, his gaze hard as steel. "Then we will follow them. We will carry this fire into their heart, and we will burn until the galaxy remembers." The survivors raised their heads, their fear tempered into resolve. The Exodus fleet turned its eyes from Saturn to the stars beyond. Humanity was no longer running. Humanity was marching to war. The Exodus fleet drifted beyond the shadow of Saturn, carrying its scars and its fire. The people had become soldiers. The ships had become weapons, and the dream of survival had become a vow of vengeance. Every survivor knew the Zorith would not stop until humanity was ash. The only choice left was to take the war to the heart of the swarm. James Carter stood at the command deck of the largest freighter, now rebuilt as a flagship. His body still bore the wounds of countless battles, but his eyes had hardened into steel. He no longer saw himself as the young pilot who once dreamed of flying through Saturn's rings. He was the torchbearer of a fallen generation, the one who carried the promise of Ethan Walker. Dr. Evelyn Ross leaned against the console, her body frail but her mind sharper than ever. She had discovered something in the signals of the Zorith, a deeper frequency, a rhythm older than the stars. The hive was not endless. It had a core, a central mind that bound the swarm together. If that core fell,
the fleet would scatter like ash in the wind. The journey was long. The Exodus fleet slipped through abandoned colonies, through shattered outposts, through graveyards of ships that told the story of a galaxy in retreat. Every world they passed whispered of extinction, yet still they pressed forward. Beyond Neptune, beyond the Kuiper Belt, until the black stretched unbroken and the Zorith waited. The hive revealed itself in the dark, a storm of living vessels stretching as far as human eyes could see. Their bodies pulsed in unison, like the veins of a single beast. At their center hung the core, vast and terrible, a sphere of obsidian fire taller than mountains, alive with endless light. It was not just a ship. It was a living god. The survivors gazed upon it with terror. Some wept, others prayed. But James stood tall. His voice filled every ship in the fleet. This is the moment we carry, every name of the fallen, every sacrifice, every promise. We do not fight for victory. We fight so that humanity will never be forgotten. Let the galaxy remember that we stood. The fleet surged forward. Engines roared, guns flared, resonance arrays screamed their deadly song. The swarm answered with fire, a storm of blue energy that lit the void. Ships shattered, families screamed. The Exodus burned, but it did not break. James led from the front, his fighter weaving through the storm, his voice guiding the fleet like a beacon.
The resonance struck the swarm again and again, tearing through the psychic bonds that bound them. Zorith hunters shrieked, twisting aimlessly. Some exploded, others turned on each other, chaos rippling through their perfect unity. For the first time, the hive faltered, but the core did not fall. It pulsed brighter, its voice echoing in the minds of every human, a wave of hunger and rage that made even the bravest tremble. The fleet shuddered under its gaze. Ships cracked open fire, spilling into the void. Lives ended in silence. Evelyn screamed into the calm. "James, the core is feeding on us. The more we fight, the stronger it becomes. We must strike at its heart directly." James knew what that meant. A sacrifice greater than Orion, a flame brighter than any star. He closed his eyes and for a moment saw Lily, his captain's daughter, waiting at a window on Earth. He saw Ethan Walker charging into the swarm. He saw every soul who had given everything so that he might stand here now. He opened his eyes, steady and unbroken. Then we light the final fire. He drove his fighter straight toward the core engines, burning. Every survivor watched as his ship blazed across the dark. Evelyn's voice cried out, begging him to stop, but James only smiled. His last words carried through the fleet. Humanity will not bow. Humanity will not vanish. Humanity will burn so bright the stars themselves will remember. He armed the resonance core inside his ship, a weapon built from every fragment of research, every stolen piece of alien technology. It would detonate with a force to shatter the hive link, but it would consume him in the fire. The core loomed ahead, vast, terrible, endless. Its light swallowed him whole. And then the sky exploded. The resonance wave ripped through the swarm. Every Zorith vessel convulsed, their veins bursting, their unity shattering. Hunters collided with each other. Firestorms erupted across the void. The core itself cracked its obsidian shell, splitting into rivers of blue flame before collapsing into silence. The hive was broken. When the light faded, the swarm was gone. Only fragments remained, drifting lifeless through the endless black. The Exodus fleet hung in silence, its survivors staring in disbelief. They had done it. Humanity had not only resisted, it had slain the god that had hunted them. But the victory carried grief. James Carter was gone. The torch had burned itself out. Yet his fire lingered in every survivor, every child who would grow, every star that would carry their story.
Evelyn stood at the command deck, tears streaming down her face. She whispered into the quiet. "He kept the promise, Captain Walker. Humanity did not vanish quietly."
The Exodus fleet turned toward Earth, its hulls broken, its numbers few, but its spirit unbroken. They would return, not as refugees, but as victors. They would return, carrying the memory of Orion, of Ethan Walker, of James Carter, and of every name carved into the stars. And across the galaxy, where once silence had ruled, a new legend began. Humanity had faced extinction and lit a fire so bright that darkness itself remembered.